Hey, what's going on? So today we've got something really interesting to talk about because Death Stranding 2 just rolled out its patch 1.10, and honestly, there's quite a bit going on behind the scenes with this update that a lot of people might just scroll past without realizing how impactful it really is. You know how sometimes an update just looks like a quick little stability fix or some vague mention of performance improvements, but when you actually sit down and spend hours in the game, you notice it feels way different. That's exactly what we're looking at here. I want to break this down in a way that feels like we're just hanging out and talking about what's new, what's improved, what's still rough around the edges, and what this patch might be setting the stage for in the future. So, buckle in, because this isn't just a patch note recap. This is about really unpacking what's changed in Death Stranding 2 with version 1.0110 and how it's shaping the experience. First off, the big thing everyone keeps bringing up is stuttering. If you've spent any decent amount of time in Death Stranding 2, you've probably run into those annoying frame hitches where everything feels like it just hiccups for a second. Sometimes it's while you're out in the open wilderness carrying a heavy load. Other times it happens right in the middle of a cinematic moment where it completely pulls you out of the immersion. And in a game like this, where immersion is the core of the entire experience, that's just brutal. This patch really makes a noticeable difference in how consistent everything feels. The way the frame pacing has been smoothed out means even if you're playing on performance mode or quality mode, those sudden drops aren't nearly as distracting anymore. It's not like they've completely eliminated every micro stutter in the entire game, but you can feel that extra layer of polish where previously the experience felt rougher. Now, the stability improvements are another huge factor. I know a lot of players were running into random crashes before, sometimes when loading into new areas, other times just out of nowhere after playing for hours. That's the sort of thing that not only wastes your time, but makes you nervous every time you're carrying cargo on a long trek, wondering if the game's just going to bail on you mid-journey. From what I've tested and from what other players are reporting, patch 1.010 drastically cuts down on those crashes. It feels like the game's foundation is a lot sturdier now, and that means you can settle into those long sessions without worrying as much about losing progress. Performance is another thing that people often underestimate until they really feel the difference. Death Stranding 2 is such a unique kind of game where the pacing, the traversal, and the atmosphere all hinge on how smooth the gameplay feels. When your character is struggling against harsh terrain, heavy rain, or the BT threats in the world, that struggle should feel intentional and grounded in the mechanics, not the result of technical hiccups. This patch fine-tunes the engine just enough that the game feels more responsive. Whether you're climbing rocky hills, crossing rivers, or navigating through areas heavy with timefall, everything has this smoother rhythm now. You still feel the tension of the world, but it's coming from the gameplay design, not from the console or PC choking on itself. And then there's the part nobody always mentions, but is just as important: the small tweaks. These are the little under-the-hood fixes that don't always get a spotlight in patch notes, but that they're what make a game feel like it's evolving over time. The subtle adjustments in load times, the way menus respond a bit faster, how transitions between cutscenes and gameplay are cleaner, it all adds up. In Death Stranding 2, where you're constantly balancing between intense narrative moments and long stretches of solitary gameplay, those little polish changes help the flow feel natural. You can almost sense that the developers are smoothing out all the edges to make sure you're fully inside that world without being distracted by clunky transitions or technical annoyances. So when we talk about this patch, we're not just talking about bug fixes. We're talking about how much more immersive and reliable the game feels now. And that matters because Death Stranding 2 isn't just another open-world action game. It's one of those titles that thrives on atmosphere, pacing, and emotional impact. When Kojima Productions makes these updates, they're not just maintaining the game, they're actively shaping the experience to make sure it lines up with the vision they originally had. And I think this patch is a perfect example of that. Something else I noticed is how much community feedback seems to be shaping these patches. If you look at the forums, Reddit discussions, and even comments on streams, stuttering and crashing were some of the most common complaints. It's like the devs actually listened, prioritized those issues, and got them handled as quickly as possible. That gives me confidence that future updates will continue addressing the pain points players bring up instead of just focusing on small backend changes. And for a game like Death Stranding 2, which is already such a niche, ambitious project, having that active relationship with the community is vital. What's interesting too is how this patch feels like it might be setting up for bigger content updates down the road. Usually when developers get these core technical patches out of the way, It frees them up to focus on adding new gameplay tweaks, content expansions, or event-based updates. And considering how Death Stranding as a series thrives on unpredictable events, weird connections between gameplay and narrative, and those little what just happened moments, I wouldn't be surprised if the groundwork being laid here is pointing towards some upcoming surprises. If you think back to the original Death Stranding, that game had updates that gradually improved and adjusted everything from online systems to balancing certain mechanics. We could be seeing the early stages of that same process here. Once stability and performance are more locked in, then the devs can turn their attention toward refining gameplay mechanics or experimenting with new systems. I'm honestly excited to see where they take it. Now, I know some people are probably wondering, is this patch enough to bring back players who might have stepped away because of those frustrating bugs? And I think the answer depends on what type of player you are. If you loved Death Stranding 2 but were annoyed by the technical problems, this patch is definitely the moment to jump back in because the experience is significantly smoother now. On the other hand, if you weren't sure about the game itself and thought the pacing or style wasn't for you, then no patch is going to fundamentally change that. But for those of us who are invested in this world and want it to feel as polished as possible, 1.01012 is a massive step in the right direction. Another thing I want to bring up is how these updates impact the emotional weight of the game. That might sound weird at first, but think about it. When the game is running smoothly, when you're not pulled out of the experience by bugs or crashes, you're able to actually absorb the story and the atmosphere in the way it was intended. And Death Stranding 2 is all about that emotional connection, whether it's the characters, the strange landscapes, or the haunting soundtrack that kicks in at just the right moment. By fixing these technical issues, the devs are making sure that those moments hit harder because you're fully present in the world instead of being distracted. And honestly, that's the beauty of patches like this. They may not sound glamorous when you read them. Things like improved stability or reduced stuttering don't jump off the page, but the reality is they completely change how the game feels in your hands. It's like when you clean the lens on your glasses or finally fix that squeaky part in your car. You might not notice how bad it was until it's gone, and then everything feels clear and smooth again. That's what patch 1.0110 has done for Death Stranding 2. Now, let's talk expectations moving forward. I think players should see this as a signal that Kojima Productions is fully committed to maintaining and refining this game for the long haul. We're not just going to get a couple of patches and then radio silence. If anything, the way this patch addresses some of the biggest frustrations shows that they're listening and actively prioritizing player experience. That's huge because Death Stranding 2 is the kind of game that benefits from being a living, evolving experience. The world is already strange and alive, but when the developers continue to nurture it with updates like this, it feels like the game itself is growing along with the community. So yeah, patch 1.110 might just look like a stability and performance update on paper, but when you actually spend time with it, you realize it's reshaping how you experience the game. Smoother gameplay, fewer crashes, less stuttering, and subtle polish across the board. It all comes together to make Death Stranding 2 feel more like the vision Kojima had in mind.